The show's format was unique. No host, just two guests, and an audience that could ask questions through a moderator in the room. The idea was to create an atmosphere of friendly conversation, but the producers seemed to know that inviting De Niro and Pesci together was like tossing a spark into a powder keg. "Well, Bobby, how's the mood?" Pesci plopped into the chair, flashing a playful grin. His voice was raspy but brimming with energy. "Same as always, Joe," De Niro replied, his tone calm but laced with a hint of irony. "Ready to tell everyone how you nearly burned down the set of Casino?" The audience laughed, and for the first minute, the conversation flowed smoothly. They reminisced about the old days, how Scorsese yelled at them over the fifth take, how Pesci improvised his legendary scenes, and how De Niro spent hours preparing for roles. The crowd listened, breathless, savoring the nostalgia. Their project for film industry veterans, Silver Screen Legacy, was introduced with warmth. De Niro spoke about the importance of respecting those who worked behind the scenes, while Pesci added that old dogs can still bite. Everything was going according to plan, until the questions began. The moderator, a young man in a sharp suit, stood up from the audience, holding a stack of note cards. His smile seemed overly self-assured, and a hush fell over the studio. He cleared his throat, glanced at the first card, and looked up at the stage. "A question from the audience for Joe Pesci," he began, his voice a touch too dramatic. "Joe, is it true you punched a colleague on set because he looked at you the wrong way? Do you play the mafia, or do you live like the mafia?" The studio froze. The audience went silent, sensing the air thicken. Cameras zoomed in on Pesci, and the director in the headset muttered a curse. Pesci sat still, his face unchanged, but his eyes narrowed like a predator sizing up its prey. He slowly leaned toward the microphone. "Listen, kid," he started, his voice low, almost menacing. "I played the mafia because I know how it looks. You? You ever seen a real punch? Or you just scribbled dumb questions?" The audience laughed nervously, but the tension didn't ease. De Niro sat with his arms crossed, his face impassive, though the corner of his mouth twitched, whether from amusement or irritation. Pesci turned to him, a spark flashing in his eyes. "What do you say, Bobby? You're the expert on living the mafia life," he added, his voice dripping with sarcasm. De Niro exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening on the armrest. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice calm but cold. "Joe, I play roles. You, though, sometimes forget where the scene ends. Maybe that's why the rumors fly." The audience gasped. It wasn't a direct hit, but the words landed hard. Pesci leaned back, his smile widening, but his eyes burned. He was clearly holding back, but everyone in the studio knew. This was just the beginning. The moderator, sensing the heat, quickly grabbed the next card. A question for Robert De Niro," he said, his voice trembling. "Is it true you say you hate Trump, but you've gotten into fights with journalists yourself? What makes you any better?" The studio erupted in whispers. Cameras buzzed, and the director in the headset was now yelling for someone to prep a commercial break. De Niro turned to the moderator, his gaze sharp enough to melt steel. He stayed silent for a long moment, and that pause was more terrifying than any response. "I say what I believe," he finally replied, enunciating each word clearly. "As for journalists, if someone sticks their nose where it doesn't belong, they get what they deserve. But I don't hide behind roles like some people." The last words were aimed at Pesci, and that was the detonator. Pesci lurched forward, his hand gripping the microphone so hard his knuckles turned white. "You serious, Bobby?" His voice quivered with anger. "You, with your 'I'm above it all' act, think you can put me down here? Maybe I should remind you about that grandpa comedy you did?" The audience erupted in shouts. Some were shocked, others thrilled, sensing a scandal of the century brewing. De Niro didn't break eye contact, his face stone cold, but his eyes flared with rage. He slowly turned to Pesci, and the studio fell into a deathly silence. "Joe," he said, his tone so chilling it silenced even the loudest spectators. "You want to talk careers? Fine. Tell me, did you sue a studio because they made you too fat? Was that an insult or your new style of fighting? The studio exploded. The audience screamed, operators struggled to keep cameras steady, and the director was now shouting into his headset, demanding a break. Pesci froze, his face reddening, his eyes blazing like coals. He leaned back slowly, but his smile was far from kind. "You want to play dirty, Bobby?" he said quietly, his voice carrying a threat that hushed the studio. "All right, let's play." The tension hit boiling point. Everyone braced for an explosion, but Pesci didn't swing. He just shot De Niro a look that promised this wasn't over. The moderator, holding a new card, was already preparing the next blow. The studio teetered on the edge of chaos, and everyone knew. This was just the start. The moderator, a young man with trembling hands, held a new card, his smug smile long gone. He knew he was holding a bomb, and the studio was waiting for it to go off. "A question for both," he began, his voice barely steady. "You guys made classics, but who watches your movies now? Don't you think you've lost relevance?" The audience gasped as if a shot had been fired. It wasn't just a question. It was a jab at the heart of two legends who defined cinema for decades. Cameras zoomed in, the director in the headset barked to keep the close-up, and the air buzzed like before a storm. De Niro sat motionless, his jaw clenched so tight every muscle was visible. Pesci slowly turned his head toward the moderator, his gaze sharp enough to burn. "Say that again," Pesci said softly, his voice thick with fury, silencing the room. "You really think we've lost relevance? Who are you to judge what people watch?" The moderator swallowed hard but didn't back down. "It's a question from the audience," he stammered, holding up the card like a shield. De Niro exhaled slowly, his fingers digging into the armrests. He turned to Pesci, and for the first time that evening, his gaze held not just anger but something else. Respect. He raised a hand, stopping Pesci, who was ready to tear into the moderator. "Joe, hold on," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Let me." The studio froze. De Niro turned to the audience, his eyes sweeping over the crowd, the operators, the moderator. He slowly stood from his chair, his presence filling the stage like he was Travis Bickle or Vito Corleone reborn. "What gets under my skin," he began, his words falling like stones in still water, "is when people think they can judge someone's career without knowing what we've been through. Joe and I didn't just make classics. We built them. We poured blood, sweat, and sleepless nights into it. And now some guy with a note card thinks he can say we've lost relevance?" The audience erupted in applause, but De Niro raised a hand, demanding silence. He turned to the moderator, his eyes blazing. "You want to know why we're here?" he continued. "Not to justify ourselves to you or anyone else. We're here to support people who've worked in this industry for decades, people folks like you forget when the lights go out. And you dare ask about relevance? Your show will be forgotten tomorrow, but our films will live forever." The crowd roared, some leaping to their feet. Pesci sat with his arms crossed, his smile genuine for the first time that night. He looked at De Niro with respect, but there was still a flicker of anger in his eyes, waiting for its moment. He leaned toward the microphone. "You know what, Bobby?" he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're right, but I'll add something. These people," he gestured to the audience, "they watch our movies. They know we're real. And you," he turned to the moderator, "you're just noise. You ask about Snickers? I did that ad because it was fun. When's the last time you did something for fun? Or do you just dig up dirt?" The audience exploded with laughter and applause. The moderator's face flushed, his hands shaking as he tried to grab another card, but Pesci didn't give him a chance. "And another thing," he went on, his voice growing hotter. "You asked Bobby about Dirty Grandpa? Let me ask you, how's it feel to judge a guy with 2 Oscars based on one movie? You know what he's done for cinema? Or do you just read headlines? And my lawsuit with the studio? I fought for my role because I respect my work. Do you respect yours?" The studio went wild. The audience shouted, clapped, some chanting, "Joe! Joe!" De Niro watched Pesci, and for the first time that night, a smile, not ironic, but real, crossed his face. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging Pesci's bullseye. But the moderator, sensing he was losing control, went all in. He grabbed the last card and, ignoring the chaos in the room, read, "Joe, did you do that Snickers ad so people would recognize you on the street again?" It was meant to be a knockout blow, but it missed. Pesci burst into a loud, infectious laugh that silenced the room. He turned to De Niro. "Bobby, you hear this?" he said, still chuckling. "They think I did that ad because people forgot me." He turned back to the moderator, his eyes gleaming. "Kid, I'm Joe Pesci. People know me without any damn Snickers. You? Anyone gonna know you when you leave this studio?" The audience roared with laughter and applause. De Niro couldn't hold back. He laughed too, and that moment was a turning point. The two legends, who'd just been trading barbs, now stood shoulder to shoulder, united against the cynicism. De Niro stood, his presence commanding the stage once more. He turned to the audience, his words aimed not just at the moderator, but at everyone who'd ever doubted their legacy. "Joe and I aren't perfect," he said, his voice calm but brimming with strength. "We've made mistakes, taken on all kinds of roles, fought our battles, but we've never betrayed cinema, and we won't let anyone." He shot a glance at the moderator. "Tear down what we've built. Our project for veterans is about respect, and we demand that respect." The audience erupted in applause that lasted minutes. Pesci stood beside De Niro, raising his hand in his signature gesture, their eyes meeting. In that look was respect, friendship, and a silent agreement. They'd won. "Let's get out of here, Bobby," Pesci said quietly, and they walked off the stage together, leaving the moderator under the scorching spotlights as the crowd cheered wildly. After the show, social media exploded. Hashtags, Yash, Team, De Niro Pesci, and Off E Rid exposed, though the moderator's name wasn't Rid, it was quickly forgotten, went viral. Clips of De Niro's speech and Pesci's outbursts racked up millions of views in hours. Fans posted about respect for legends, and the Silver Screen Legacy Project received record-breaking donations. The moderator became a meme, his career wobbling, while Night Talk's producers got their ratings but at the cost of the show's reputation. De Niro and Pesci, meanwhile, emerged as even bigger heroes, their conflict turning into a triumph. In an interview the next day, they just smiled and said, "We told the truth."